The illusion of choice. You stand at a crossroads, presented with paths that seem divergent, each beckoning with promise. But what if the map was drawn by someone else, and the roads all led to the same destination? The illusion of choice whispers the sweet lie that you are free. In psychology and marketing, the illusion of choice is a subtle form of control. It offers multiple options that appear different but are functionally identical in outcome or intent. You may think you're choosing between brands, candidates, or even ideologies, but beneath the surface, the differences are often cosmetic. This tactic relies on a comforting narrative, autonomy. Yet, when the options are designed by the same architects, freedom becomes a performance, not a reality. Even something as simple as choosing between 3 similar streaming plans or voting between 2 nearly indistinguishable policies can mask deeper constraints. It's not always the absence of choice that's dangerous. It's the presence of choices that deceive. We stop questioning once we feel we've decided. Take a breath and consider this. How often do you choose between things already chosen for you? Let's move deeper now into something even quieter. What happens when the manipulation is not in what's offered, but in what's withheld? The power of omission. Sometimes the most dangerous lies are not told, they're left unsaid. Silence has a shape, a weight, and in the absence of truth, your mind fills in the blanks with what it needs to believe. The power of omission is a psychological manipulation that hides behind half-truths and selective storytelling. Rather than deceive you with fiction, it deprives you of key facts. A government report highlights successes, but omits the failures. A partner shares their version of events, carefully edited. A news outlet reports a fact, but leaves out the context. The result is not a lie, but something even more convincing. A vacuum that your brain rushes to fill, often with comforting, distorted, or misleading assumptions. The human mind craves coherence, and in its hunger for meaning, it rarely pauses to question what was missing. Omission is powerful because it's invisible. You can't see what isn't there. And that silence creates space for manipulation to thrive, gently, elegantly, and without resistance. So take a moment. Reflect not just on what you've been told, but on what's been left out. Now, let's move forward. Because sometimes, the most convincing truths are the ones we hear again, and again, and again. The illusion of truth effect. Repeat something often enough, and it starts to shimmer with familiarity. And when something feels familiar, it begins to feel true. Not because it is, but because it feels like it must be. The illusion of truth. Effect is a psychological bias where repetition breeds believability. The mind is built to conserve effort. When it hears something again, it tags it as easier to process, more fluent, and, dangerously, more accurate. This is why propaganda works, why advertising slogans seep into your subconscious, why falsehoods on social media, repeated without correction, start to pass for reality. Your brain mistakes cognitive ease for credibility. The unsettling part is that this mechanism bypasses rationality. Even if you know a statement is false, if you hear it enough, doubt creeps in. Your defenses wear down, and slowly you stop questioning it. Repetition is a rhythm, and the mind is wired to dance. Let that settle. Think of how many ideas you've accepted, not because you proved them, but because you heard them, many times, in many ways. So softly, they began to sound like your own thoughts. And what if those thoughts, those inner echoes, started with you? Let's go deeper now into the loops we build within ourselves. Self-Persuasion Loops. It begins with a whisper, a quiet justification, a harmless reason for doing something that doesn't quite align with your beliefs. But the moment you explain it to yourself, you begin to believe it. Self-persuasion is the eerie phenomenon where you convince yourself of something often to reduce internal conflict. You might do something questionable, then tell yourself it was necessary or even noble. That small mental adjustment eases the discomfort of cognitive dissonance, but it also locks you into a feedback loop. Your actions shape your beliefs, and your beliefs then justify more actions. Over time, the loop tightens. What started as a compromise becomes a conviction. This process is particularly dangerous because it feels voluntary. No one is forcing you, but in reality, you're trapped in a cycle of self-justification, slowly editing your memories, values, and perceptions to make your past make sense. We often imagine mind control as something external. But what if the most effective kind is the one you do to yourself? The beliefs you build to protect your own self-image can become the bars of your own mental prison. Take a breath. You're not alone in this. But let's shift the lens. What if someone else isn't just nudging your thoughts, but rewriting your entire sense of reality? Gaslighting, rewriting your reality. What if you woke up one day and couldn't trust your own memory, not because it failed you, but because someone quietly, repeatedly told you it had? Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation that erodes a person's sense of reality. It starts slowly. You're remembering it wrong. That never happened. You're just being emotional. These small statements, over time, chip away at your certainty. Eventually, you doubt your memory, your intuition, your sanity. It's named after the 1944 film Gaslight, where a man manipulates his wife into believing she's going mad by subtly altering their environment and denying it. The terrifying brilliance of gaslighting lies in its subtlety. It doesn't require force, only suggestion. The manipulator becomes the arbiter of truth, and once they've claimed that role, everything you think or feel must pass through their filter. Reality becomes negotiable. You lose your ability to trust yourself, and in that void, they take control. Pause for a moment. Imagine how easily your world could be rewritten, not with lies, but with persistent doubt. And now, as the lines blur, let us move further into the shadows, into the patterns of reinforcement that reward you just enough to keep you chasing more. Foot in the door technique. Imagine someone knocking gently, not to barge in, just to ask for something small. A favor so minor it would feel rude to say no, but what happens once the door is open, even just a crack? The foot in the door technique is a psychological strategy where a small request precedes a larger one. Once someone agrees to the initial ask, they are far more likely to comply with the next. It's not just about requests, it's about reshaping identity. When we say yes, we begin to see ourselves as agreeable, helpful, cooperative. That identity is then used against us, softly, quietly. It's how people are drawn into deeper commitments, slowly and gently. A small signature on a petition leads to a donation. A free trial becomes a paid subscription. An innocent conversation unfolds into manipulation. The brilliance and the danger lies in the subtlety. You don't feel tricked. You feel like you're just being consistent. But consistency, like all virtues, has a shadow. So as we drift into the next idea, ask yourself, how many yeses have you given? Not because you wanted to, but because you didn't want to contradict who you were the moment before. The halo effect. Sometimes we don't fall for people. We fall for the light that surrounds them. The halo effect is a cognitive bias where our impression of someone in one area, often their looks, charm, or status, spills over into unrelated judgments. If a person is attractive, we may assume they're intelligent. If they speak confidently, we might believe they're trustworthy. It's not logic, it's illusion. A glow that bleeds across our perceptions. First studied by psychologist Edward Thorndike in the early 20th century, this effect shows how human judgment is not segmented and fair, but fused and fallible. We don't see a person, we see a constellation of assumptions orbiting a single trait. This bias is used constantly in advertising, politics, even relationships. We trust the well-dressed stranger, admire the eloquent speaker, follow the beautiful influencer, not because of what they are, but because of how they seem. The real danger? We rarely notice it, because the glow is warm, comforting, and deeply convincing. Take a moment here. Let your thoughts settle into the realization that your mind isn't just seeing, it's projecting. And now, let's dim that halo and turn towards something colder, the fear that binds and the power that feeds it. Fear appeal, conditioning. What makes a message memorable? Often, it's not reason, it's fear. Fear appeal conditioning is a psychological tactic where emotions, especially fear, are used to persuade or control. Think of political campaigns that show violent imagery or health ads that focus on death and disease. These messages don't aim to inform, they aim to condition, to link certain behaviors or beliefs with safety and others with danger. It's Pavlovian at its core. The bell rings and the fear salivates. Over time, the presence of fear becomes enough to change behavior. Vote this way, avoid that group, obey these rules. Fear doesn't need evidence, it only needs repetition. The eerie part is how effective it is, because fear bypasses logic. It hijacks the nervous system. You react before you reflect, and over time, you become more reactive than reflective. Think now about the fears you've inherited, the reactions that aren't really yours. Let them drift to the surface. And as you breathe, settle deeper into the next idea, one where fear and pleasure dance together unpredictably, guiding you, trapping you, with just enough reward to keep you spinning. Intermittent reinforcement trap. Sometimes the worst thing someone can give you is just enough. Intermittent reinforcement is a psychological phenomenon where rewards are given inconsistently, creating the most persistent and obsessive behaviors. This isn't a glitch, it's a feature. If rewards were reliable, your brain would learn and move on. But when they're unpredictable, your mind becomes addicted to the possibility. This trap is everywhere. It's in romantic relationships where affection is given and withdrawn, in texts that arrive days late just when you were about to walk away, in gambling, in gaming, in social media, where the next win, the next like, the next message might be just around the corner. This isn't about pleasure, it's about hope. And hope, when dangled just out of reach, becomes a leash. Intermittent reinforcement doesn't just trap behavior, it rewires your brain to crave instability. You become loyal to chaos, addicted to the maybe. Let your breath fall softly now. Reflect on the rhythms that no longer serve you, and as the noise of chasing fades, we'll descend into something quieter, a loyalty to loss, built on time already given. Sunk cost fallacy. We cling not because it's right, but because we've already paid. The sunk cost fallacy is a cognitive bias where past investments of time, energy, or money distort present decisions. We stay in failing relationships, continue unfinished projects, or remain in dead-end jobs, not because they still serve us, but because we've already invested so much. To walk away feels like admitting loss. So we stay, and lose even more. This fallacy traps us in emotional accounting. We weigh what we've spent, not what we stand to gain. But the past is gone. The cost is sunk. And still, it haunts our choices. Businesses fall into it. Governments too. But the most haunting version is personal. The dreams we don't let die. The stories we keep telling ourselves. The identities we won't outgrow. Let this moment be a pause, not in regret, but in release. You are not what you've invested in. You are not obligated to continue suffering just because you once tolerated it. And now, as we exhale the weight of the past, let's drift further into the next quiet manipulation. one that uses you to persuade yourself. The spotlight effect. Have you ever felt like everyone was watching you, judging, noticing your every flaw? Like a spotlight had been turned on and the world was your silent audience? This is the spotlight effect, a psychological phenomenon where we vastly overestimate how much others notice or remember about us. That stain on your shirt, the awkward thing you said, the slight tremor in your voice. To you, they seem magnified. To others, barely a flicker in their minds. The effect stems from a self-centered mental lens, not out of arrogance, but out of proximity. We are always with ourselves, so our mistakes echo louder in our own heads. But to others, their thoughts are mostly focused on themselves, caught in their own spotlight. This illusion leads to anxiety, perfectionism, and fear of failure. We perform not just for others, but for the imagined gaze we think they hold. We live not in their minds, but in our projections of them. So breathe now, slowly. Let the spotlight dim. Let go of the imaginary eyes. The truth is, no one's watching quite as closely as you fear. And from this quiet comfort, let's step into the unsettling space where two conflicting beliefs can live inside us, each pulling in different directions. Cognitive dissonance. There's a peculiar discomfort that comes from holding two truths that contradict each other, like oil and water swirling inside the same glass. Cognitive dissonance is the mental tension we feel when our beliefs, values, or actions don't align. A person who sees themselves as kind might feel a sharp unease after acting selfishly. A smoker who values health must either quit or rewrite the narrative to justify staying. This psychological discomfort is powerful and the mind hates it. So it works quickly to resolve the tension, often not by changing behavior but by changing belief. We rationalize, we forget. We twist facts until they feel safe again. It's a subtle kind of self-deception, one that reshapes reality to avoid inner conflict. Politicians do it. Religions institutionalize it. But most hauntingly, it happens quietly, within all of us, every single day. Think now about the little stories you've told yourself to stay comfortable, not because they were true, but because they silenced the noise. And as that thought softens and floats away, let's look at the next invisible thread, the one that trains you without your permission every day, like a quiet hand shaping your habits. Operant conditioning in daily life. You may think you make your choices freely, but what if you're being trained, shaped like clay, by invisible rewards and punishments? Operant conditioning, developed by B.F. Skinner, is the idea that behavior is influenced by consequences. When an action is followed by a reward, we're more likely to repeat it. When followed by a punishment, we shy away. This isn't just theory. It's the scaffolding of behavior itself. From childhood, we're conditioned by praise, scolding, gold stars, withheld affection. As adults, the world rewards productivity, conformity, likability, likes, retweets, bonuses, rejection. Each outcome presses subtly on your choices until you're no longer acting from desire, but from learned reflex. This is how apps keep us scrolling, how algorithms teach us what to think, how manipulation hides behind positive reinforcement. You're not just making choices, you're reacting to patterns you didn't set. So pause here. Reflect. What are you being trained to crave, to avoid, to repeat? And with that lingering question, let's step into something more emotional. Not control through consequence, but control through compassion. When empathy becomes a weapon instead of a gift. Weaponized empathy. Empathy is one of humanity's greatest gifts, the ability to feel what others feel, to step into their emotional world. But what happens when that gift is used against you? Weaponized empathy is the strategic use of emotional appeal to manipulate behavior. It doesn't shout or threaten. It whispers, cries, and pleads. It guilt trips. It tells you that if you really cared, you'd do what it wants. It turns your kindness into a leash. This manipulation often hides in plain sight. A partner says, "If you loved me, you'd do this for me." A company tells you, "Support us or you don't care about the planet." The message is always the same. Your morality is conditional on your obedience. It works because empathy bypasses logic. It makes you question your values, your boundaries, your worth. And over time, you become someone who sacrifices yourself, not from generosity, but from fear of being cruel. Breathe now. Let the guilt unwind. Your empathy is a light. Don't let it be shadowed by someone else's need for control. And from this emotional mirror, let's drift into a more literal one. The strange way we reflect and absorb the emotions of others without even trying. The mirror effect. Emotional mirroring. Have you ever found yourself smiling just because someone else smiled? Or felt a wave of anxiety simply by being near someone tense? It's not imagination. It's the mirror effect. Emotional mirroring is the unconscious process where we reflect the moods, gestures, and energy of those around us. It's powered by mirror neurons, tiny architects of empathy and connection. When someone cries, you may feel tight in your chest. When they laugh, your muscles relax. Their emotions become yours. But this beautiful human connection has a shadow. Emotional mirroring can be used to manipulate, subtly and invisibly. A narcissist may feign your feelings to gain trust. A skilled manipulator mirrors your enthusiasm, your pain, your language, just enough to become familiar, safe, disarming. Before you realize it, you begin to align with them. Your walls drop, your boundaries soften. You don't know why, but you trust them. So pause, reflect. How much of your emotion is yours, and how much have you absorbed from someone else? As the mirror fades into mist, let's continue onward toward the fragile identities we construct to be loved, accepted, and safe from rejection. Authority bias. Why do we trust the man in the lab coat? Why does a uniform or a title grant such automatic reverence? Even when the orders feel wrong or the logic feels flawed, we often surrender, simply because someone seems to know better. This is the quiet pull of authority bias, a psychological tendency to assign greater weight, truth, and power to the words of those we see as authoritative. In Stanley Milgram's infamous experiment, participants delivered what they believed were deadly electric shocks to strangers, all because a man in a white coat calmly told them to continue. Authority bias is deeply embedded in social survival. Trusting leaders, elders, and experts allowed societies to function. But that evolutionary shortcut is easily hijacked. Politicians, marketers, and even cult leaders don robes of legitimacy, confident in the unconscious obedience it inspires. We follow the expert's advice, even when it conflicts with our values. We trust the voice behind the podium more than the quiet one inside our head. So breathe and reflect. How often do you obey? Not because it's right, but because it's endorsed. Let's stay with this whisper of unconscious influence and move toward something softer, even more invisible, the quiet power of repetition and familiarity. Mere exposure manipulation. Why do some things grow on you? Not because they're good, but simply because they're there. The mere exposure effect reveals a strange truth. The more we see something, the more we tend to like it. This isn't a choice. It's not rational. It's a quirk of the mind, rooted in familiarity's calming glow. A melody repeated enough becomes catchy. A face seen often becomes trusted. Repetition turns the unfamiliar into comfort. This makes the effect dangerously easy to exploit. Advertisers know that bombarding you with logos, slogans, and jingles increases your attachment, even when you're not paying attention. Politicians repeat messages, not for clarity, but for dominance. Social media rewards what's constant, not necessarily what's true. The trap is subtle. It doesn't force you to believe. It gently nudges again and again until belief begins to feel like your own. So ask yourself softly, what have I accepted simply because I've seen it enough? As this thought settles into the background, let's shift from repetition to rarity, from the common to the dangerously scarce. Because what we see too much, we overlook. But what's rare, that becomes irresistible. The Scarcity Principle. Imagine a door closing, an offer vanishing, a moment slipping through your fingers. Doesn't it make you want it more? The Scarcity Principle is the psychological phenomenon where limited availability increases perceived value. A product labeled "only 3 left" suddenly becomes desirable. A person who pulls away feels more magnetic. Opportunities feel more urgent when they're fleeting. It's not just marketing, it's ancient instinct. In evolutionary terms, rare resources were crucial to survival. When food, water, or mates were scarce, they became high priority. That programming still whispers in your brain today. So scarcity is used as a lever, to sell, to seduce, to push you into action before reason has time to speak. This is how countdown timers, exclusive offers, and emotional unavailability become tools of control. Scarcity distorts judgment. It pulls your focus, narrows your thinking, and hijacks your values. So breathe, slow down, ask, do I want this, or do I just fear not having it? Now, from the urgency of loss, we drift into a stranger kind of trickery, the illusion of personal insight that isn't really about you at all. The Barnum Effect, Personalization Trap. Have you ever read a horoscope that felt eerily accurate? Or taken a personality test that seemed to understand your soul? That's the Barnum Effect, the tendency to accept vague, general statements as uniquely tailored to us. The name comes from showman P.T. Barnum, who famously said, "There's a sucker born every minute." The trick lies in crafting descriptions that feel personal while actually being universal. You're independent, but crave connection. You have hidden potential. Sometimes you doubt yourself. These statements fit almost everyone, but when framed with confidence, they feel intimate, real. This cognitive glitch makes it easy to be misled by astrology, fortune-telling, online quizzes, and even manipulative people who mirror our hopes and fears back at us. We want to be seen, so we accept the illusion of understanding over the discomfort of ambiguity. The effect is harmless in fun, but dangerous in persuasion. It makes us trust the wrong voices, buy the wrong things, follow the wrong leaders, because we think they get us. So reflect gently. How much of what you believe about yourself was handed to you? Now, let's slip into something more human, a flaw so charming it makes us more likable, not less. The Pratfall Effect. What if your mistakes made you more lovable? The Pratfall Effect reveals a strange paradox. Competent people become more appealing when they show vulnerability. A stumble, a spilled coffee, a forgotten line during a speech. These moments don't diminish respect, they deepen it. This effect suggests that perfection creates distance, but flaws create connection. When someone who's already capable reveals their humanness, we feel closer to them. We forgive more. We trust more. Because in their imperfection, we see ourselves. But here lies the manipulation. Skilled communicators stage their pratfalls. A scripted slip-up. A carefully shared story of past failure. It softens resistance, lowers defenses. Politicians cry. CEOs laugh at their own blunders. And in doing so, they pull you in, not with authority, but with relatability. Even your favorite influencers? They know this trick well. So as you drift with this thought, ask yourself, are their flaws real or rehearsed? Let's move now from the lovable to the uncomfortable, into the realm of learned helplessness, where control is stripped away so gently you forget you ever had it. Anchoring bias. Imagine walking into a shop and seeing a jacket priced at $2,000. You scoff, it's outrageous. But just beside it is another, nearly identical, for $400. Suddenly, it feels reasonable, almost like a bargain. This is the quiet work of anchoring bias, a mental shortcut where your mind latches on to the first piece of information it receives, using it as a reference point for everything that follows. The first number, the first story, the first impression becomes the anchor, and your thoughts orbit around it, often without your awareness. It's used in negotiations, advertising, even courtroom sentences. Set the anchor high, and anything lower feels fair. Set the anchor low, and everything else seems excessive. Your perception bends around that first idea like gravity around a star. The manipulation is subtle. You're not forced to believe anything, but your frame of judgment is silently hijacked. What feels like a choice is often just a reaction to the anchor placed before you. So take a breath and ask yourself, what's truly valuable? And what only seems so because of what came first? Now let's drift into a closely related illusion, one that quietly changes your preferences, not by what's offered, but by what's placed beside it. The Decoy Effect. Suppose you're choosing between two subscription plans. One is cheap but basic, the other pricey but full-featured. Then a third option appears, just slightly cheaper than the expensive one, but clearly worse. And suddenly, the expensive plan seems like the smart choice. This is the Decoy Effect, a strategic distortion of perception through comparison. It works not by changing what's offered, but by changing how it's framed. That third, inferior choice isn't meant to be picked. It's bait to make the other option look better by contrast. Marketers wield this tactic masterfully. The decoy is planted to push you toward a specific outcome while giving the illusion of autonomy. You feel smart for choosing the better deal, unaware that your decision has been carefully engineered. The unsettling truth? Your preferences are more malleable than you think. What you want can be reshaped, not by force, but by clever placement. And so we float from manipulated choice to something even more personal, how we assume others think, and how that assumption can trap us inside our own echo. The false consensus trap. Have you ever thought, everyone probably agrees with me on this, only to be surprised when they don't? This is the false consensus effect, the cognitive bias where we overestimate how much others share our beliefs, behaviors, and values. It's comforting, isn't it, to imagine the world is a mirror of our own mind. But in that comfort lies distortion. We surround ourselves with people who think like us, follow media that confirms our worldview, and ignore signs of contradiction. This creates a social illusion, where disagreement feels like deviance, not difference. The trap is subtle but powerful. It fuels polarization, reinforces stereotypes, and blinds us to the complexity of others. When you believe your views are the norm, empathy fades. Dialogue dies. Dissent becomes dangerous. But here's the eerie part. This illusion feels so real, we rarely question it. We trust the reflection without checking the mirror. So take a moment to wonder how much of what you believe about others is really just a projection of yourself. Let's continue now gently into a realm of mimicry and masks, where the face we show is shaped by the faces we see. The Chameleon Effect. Have you ever found yourself copying someone's posture or speech without even realizing it? That's the Chameleon Effect, our unconscious tendency to mirror the behaviors, gestures, and expressions of those around us. It's a silent social glue. When we mimic, we build rapport. When we're mimicked, we feel seen. But beneath this social dance lies a question of identity. Who are you really when your actions are shaped by those you observe? Are you responding or simply reflecting? This subtle mimicry can be used deliberately. Salespeople, therapists, even manipulators know that echoing your movements or mood can lower defenses and increase trust. You feel understood. But it may just be an illusion of resonance. And in a world of curated personas and social media mimicry, the effect becomes more pervasive. We become mirrors of mirrors, slowly losing touch with the source. So pause and ask softly, which parts of you are real, and which were borrowed? Let's slide now from imitation to something more haunting, the slow disappearance of disagreement, and how group unity can quietly erase the individual. Groupthink, the death of dissent. In the warmth of consensus, silence often masquerades as agreement. Groupthink is the chilling phenomenon where the desire for harmony overrides critical thinking. In a group setting, people suppress dissent to maintain unity. They ignore warnings, silence doubts, and defer to the collective will, even when it's clearly flawed. This has led to catastrophic decisions in governments, corporations, even cults. The group moves together, eyes closed, convinced they are right because no one dares say otherwise. The danger lies in the comfort. Belonging is a powerful drug. When the group nods, so do we, even when our instincts whisper otherwise. Speaking up feels disloyal, staying quiet feels safe, and so the truth dies, not with a scream, but with a shrug. The haunting part? Everyone may secretly disagree, yet no one speaks. So breathe deeply and consider. When have you swallowed your voice just to stay in tune? Let's drift gently now into the fragile world of memory. But what if the memories you carry never truly happened? The false memory effect. What if the most vivid memories you carry, the ones that define your past, never happened the way you think they did? Or worse, what if some never happened at all? This is the unsettling power of the false memory effect. Our brains, though miraculous, are not flawless recorders of reality. Memories are not stored like files in a cabinet. They are reconstructed, reshaped each time we recall them, colored by mood, suggestion, and time. Researchers like Elizabeth Loftus have shown how easily memories can be implanted. A simple suggestion, do you remember when you got lost in the mall as a child, can become a fully imagined recollection, complete with emotion, detail, even sensory experience. The implications are staggering. If memory can be rewritten, so can identity. After all, who are you if not the sum of your remembered past? This concept doesn't just haunt the courtroom or therapy room. It touches every relationship, every childhood story, every conviction shaped by moments long gone. So breathe slowly and ask, how much of what you believe about yourself might be fiction? And now, we drift from the unreliability of memory to the haunting pull of unfinished things, echoes that demand resolution, even in dreams. The Zeigarnik Effect, unfinished business. There's a strange tension in the human mind, a quiet buzzing that lingers around tasks left undone. A book half read, a conversation unresolved, a goal half met. These fragments haunt us more than the ones we've completed. This is known as the Zeigarnik Effect, named after psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, who noticed that waiters could recall unpaid orders better than settled ones. Once a task is complete, the mind lets it go. But when something is left unfinished, it clings, whispering in the background. It's why cliffhangers keep you watching, why incomplete stories replay in your dreams. Your brain, craving closure, keeps the door ajar, hoping you'll return to finish what was started. But here's the twist. This effect can be used against you. Marketers and designers create open loops, promising just one more thing to keep you hooked. Unfinished storylines, dangling goals, endless notifications. They all keep your attention hostage. And sometimes, even relationships become Zeigarnik loops, unresolved, unclosed, unforgettable. So let your breath soften. Let the unfinished remain undone, for now. And as we float further, consider a darker illusion, how our minds can ignore the extraordinary simply to preserve a fragile sense of normal. Normalcy bias. What would you do if everything around you began to fall apart? Slowly, subtly, like a dream slipping into nightmare. Would you act, or would you wait, hoping everything returns to normal? Normalcy bias is the mind's quiet resistance to change, its deep, instinctual urge to assume that tomorrow will look like today. Even in the face of danger, our brains seek comfort in the familiar. We downplay red flags. We delay decisions. We deny the storm. History is filled with tragedies worsened by this bias. Before wars, disasters, collapses, there's often disbelief. This can't be happening. Things like this don't happen here. And so people stay, they freeze, they trust that normal will return. But normal is not a promise. It's a pattern we project, even when reality has already shifted beneath our feet. This bias shields us from fear, but also blinds us to truth. It's not evil, just comforting. Comforting enough to keep us asleep, even as the world burns quietly around us. So let's rest here a moment and ask, what signs have we chosen to ignore? From denial, we drift next to affirmation, how we seek only what confirms what we already believe. Confirmation bias. Is truth something we seek, or just something we recognize when it agrees with us? Confirmation bias is the tendency to favor information that confirms our existing beliefs, while dismissing or ignoring anything that contradicts them. It is the reason arguments escalate, debates entrench, and personal growth stalls. We are drawn not to facts, but to validation. This bias is subtle and pervasive. When you read an article that aligns with your views, you nod along, feeling informed. But if it opposes your perspective, you're more likely to scrutinize, reject, or simply scroll past it. The mind becomes a closed loop, echoing itself. Social media accelerates this loop. Algorithms feed us content that reinforces our preferences. Over time, we see a world that agrees with us, not because it is true, but because it's familiar. And so, knowledge becomes comfort, not challenge. Truth becomes tribal. But there is something strangely soothing in this illusion, a gentle lullaby of coherence. Now, as we float into the next idea, we'll meet a distortion even more ironic, where those who know the least are often the most convinced they know it all. The Dunning-Kruger Illusion. There's a paradox at the heart of human understanding. The less we know, the more certain we often feel. This is the eerie essence of the Dunning-Kruger Effect, a cognitive bias where individuals with low ability in a domain overestimate their competence because they lack the very knowledge needed to recognize their own ignorance. It's not arrogance, it's blindness. A novice can feel confident simply because they don't yet see what they don't know. We've all met the overconfident beginner, offering loud advice in areas they barely understand. But perhaps more unsettling is this. We've all been that person. At some point, in some domain, we've all mistaken simplicity for mastery. The illusion is humbling. It whispers that confidence is not proof of knowledge, and that humility, the soft voice of "I don't know," might actually be the first sign of wisdom. In a world where opinions scream and certainty sells, the Dunning-Kruger effect quietly guides us into dangerous waters, without ever ringing the alarm. So breathe in this quiet irony, and let your thoughts settle. Next, we'll explore something more intimate. How we mistakenly believe our thoughts are as transparent to others as they feel to us. The illusion of transparency. We walk through life believing our emotions are visible, our thoughts echoing clearly through our expressions, our silences. We assume others can see us as we feel ourselves to be, fragile, open, obvious. But they often don't, and that dissonance is quietly disarming. This is the illusion of transparency, the deeply rooted belief that our internal states are more apparent to others than they truly are. We feel nervous during a speech and think the crowd must see it. We tell a lie and believe our guilt is glowing from our face. Yet more often than not, we are opaque, even to those closest to us. Psychologists have shown that people consistently overestimate how well others can read their thoughts or emotions. We are mysterious to one another, even in plain sight. This illusion subtly controls us. It can magnify anxiety, encourage overcompensation, or lead us to retreat from vulnerability. We assume we've already revealed too much, when in truth, we remain unknowable. Let this idea rest with you. You are not as transparent as you believe, and neither is anyone else. Now let us gently invert the game into a strange tactic where resistance becomes compliance and defiance becomes control. Reverse psychology. What if telling someone not to do something makes them more likely to do it? What if resistance itself is a lever? Reverse psychology operates in this shadowy realm. It's the tactic of urging the opposite of what you truly desire, exploiting a person's instinct to assert independence. The rebellious child is told, "You probably shouldn't eat your vegetables." The stubborn partner hears, "Don't worry about helping, I know you won't." And suddenly, they comply. This technique works because of a subtle interplay between control and autonomy. When people sense their freedom is threatened, they often react by asserting it. Reverse psychology weaponizes that desire to resist, but beneath the surface it raises questions of manipulation and self-awareness. When are we choosing freely, and when are we simply reacting? If a push causes us to pull, have we acted on our own will or someone else's? This tactic is common in relationships, advertising, even politics, where the illusion of choice conceals a careful orchestration of outcomes. As we float further into this dance of influence, let's examine a darker conditioning, how our cravings can be triggered like bells through sights, sounds, and smells. Pavlovian Advertising. Picture a bell and a dog who salivates at its sound. Not because the bell means anything, but because it once meant food. Over time, the sound itself becomes a trigger. This is classical conditioning, famously demonstrated by Ivan Pavlov. But the real marvel is not in the lab. It's in the world around you, where advertisers have trained your brain to respond like Pavlov's dogs. Think of a fragrance that reminds you of love, a jingle that makes you smile, a logo that sparks hunger before you've even seen the food. These aren't coincidences. They're conditioned associations formed by repetition, timing, and emotional pairing. Pavlovian advertising doesn't ask for your permission. It bypasses logic and settles into your nervous system. You don't reason your way into desire. You feel it, like a reflex. And when your responses are automatic, who exactly is in control? As you soften into this realization, let it float beside you. The most powerful manipulation is the one you never notice. Now, drift with me into a quieter illusion, a memory that never was, a warmth manufactured by design. Planted nostalgia. Have you ever longed for a time you never lived in? Felt homesick for a place you've never been? That tender ache, that bittersweet pull, it might not be memory at all. It might be planted nostalgia. Advertisers and media creators have mastered the art of inducing longing for eras you've never touched. Synth-heavy music, vintage filters, VHS textures. They recreate the emotional contours of the past, even if you were never there to feel them firsthand. This effect works because nostalgia bypasses critical thinking. It softens the heart. When brands evoke imaginary childhoods or idealized decades, they wrap products in the illusion of innocence, safety, and simplicity. It's a gentle trap. You're not just buying an object, you're buying the feeling it promises, a longing for a time when life felt fuller, even if that time never truly existed. So consider, as your breath slows, how many of your yearnings are yours, and how many have been whispered into you like lullabies sung by strangers. Let that question carry you softly forward into the next phenomenon, where mere words can tilt perception and shape your reaction before you even realize you've heard them. Semantic Priming. Sometimes the mind doesn't need to be persuaded directly. It only needs to be nudged. Semantic priming is the eerie art of influence through suggestion. When you're exposed to one word or idea, it subtly shapes your reaction to what follows. Say the word doctor, and you're faster to recognize the word nurse. Say ice, and you might more quickly process cold. It's not magic, it's a shortcut your brain uses to conserve energy. But in the hands of the manipulative, it becomes a silent weapon. Politicians, advertisers, and persuaders of all kinds use this without ever naming it. They prime you with words that activate specific frames of thought: safety, fear, patriotism, purity. And once you've been primed, your reactions are no longer entirely your own. It happens before you notice, before your conscious mind is even aware. This makes you wonder, how many of your responses today were entirely yours? And how many were shaped by something just beneath the surface? Let that question settle in the silence. And from this invisible touch, we now glide toward a more personal erosion, the slow disappearance of boundaries in the name of closeness. Boundary erosion. Imagine a line drawn in sand. At first, it's clear, sharp, unmistakable, but over time, with wind and waves, it begins to blur. You don't notice it disappearing until the line is gone. That's how boundary erosion works, quietly, persistently, and without a sound. Boundaries, emotional, physical, psychological, are how we protect our sense of self, but manipulators often erode them subtly. A touch that lingers too long, a comment that feels too intimate, a request that's just slightly too much. It doesn't start with control, it begins with closeness. Each concession feels small, almost reasonable. You accommodate. You adapt. And then one day, you look back and realize you've crossed 1,000 lines you never meant to. Boundary erosion is powerful because it disguises itself as connection. It weaponizes intimacy. And once your defenses have been lowered, control can slip in unnoticed. This is how people lose themselves, gradually, never suddenly. Not with a scream, but with a sigh. Now take a breath. Feel where your edges begin and end, and follow me into the next layer of influence, the strange emotional echo that happens when one person feels something and everyone else follows. Emotional contagion. Have you ever entered a room and felt tension before a word was spoken? Or found yourself laughing simply because someone else was? That invisible transmission is emotional contagion, the quiet spread of mood from one person to another, like a yawn rippling across a crowd. We are wired to mimic the emotions we perceive. Through facial expressions, vocal tones, even posture, we absorb and reflect the feelings of those around us. It's an ancient survival mechanism rooted in mirror neurons designed to foster empathy and cohesion. But in the wrong hands, this reflex becomes a tool for control. Leaders, marketers, influencers, they know that if they project calm, you'll feel calm. If they drip fear, you'll tense. If they rage, you might rage too, without knowing why. It bypasses logic and speaks directly to the body. And once your emotions aren't your own, whose are they? Let that settle. Let it wash over you. Now let's drift deeper into a realm where expectation itself has power, where merely being seen in a certain light can change who you become. The Golem Effect. Negative expectations. What happens when someone expects you to fail? What if their doubt silently shapes your path, nudging you toward the very outcome they assumed? This is the Golem Effect, a dark mirror of belief. When others hold low expectations for us, we often, unconsciously, fulfill them. It's not a curse, it's a feedback loop. A teacher believes a student is slow, so they challenge them less, offer less feedback, lower their tone. The student receives this message and stops trying, and the prophecy fulfills itself. It's manipulation through neglect, through subtle dismissal. This effect reveals how fragile our self-concept truly is. It invites a haunting question: how many of our failures were quietly shaped by the shadows others cast over us? And how often do we do the same to others, limiting them not through action but through belief? As you rest here, let that weight dissolve, because the opposite also exists, a brighter illusion, just as powerful. What happens when someone sees potential in you that you didn't yet see in yourself? The Pygmalion Effect. Positive expectations. Now imagine the inverse of the Golem. Someone looks at you not with doubt, but with belief. They see promise, even before you've proven it, and strangely, you rise to meet it. This is the Pygmalion Effect, named after the myth of a sculptor who fell in love with his own creation. In psychology, it describes how high expectations can actually lead to improved performance. Teachers, leaders, parents, when they expect success, they often get it. Why? Because belief changes behavior. Encouragement grows. Patience expands. Investment deepens. And the person being believed in begins to internalize that faith. But here's where it turns eerie, because this too is a kind of control. We often mistake belief for truth, but even the positive lens reshapes reality, bending the self into something new. Are we becoming more of who we are, or who they believe we should be? As you let that question drift into your mind, feel how perception can mold the world, not just your own, but society at large. What if the stories we hear each day aren't just reflections of truth, but the result of someone's deliberate decision to tell this story instead of another? Agenda setting theory. You may believe you decide what matters, but often the questions you ask are given to you. Agenda setting theory explains how media doesn't tell you what to think, it tells you what to think about. The stories it chooses to show, the headlines it repeats, the frames it applies, all shape your mental landscape. If a topic dominates the news, it dominates your thoughts, not because it's more real, but because it's more present. This is the silent power of attention. The public doesn't decide what's important. They react to what's been placed before them. And the more we see something, the more urgent it feels. In this way, reality is filtered, not by truth, but by visibility. And that raises a chilling question. Who decides what you see? Who shapes the stories, the concerns, the crises that loop in your mind before sleep? Let that thought hang in the quiet. Now we drift into even slower waters, where change comes not with a crash, but with a gentle rise in temperature. The boiling frog syndrome. Imagine a frog in a pot of water. If the water is suddenly boiling, the frog will leap to safety. But if the heat rises slowly, so gradually it's almost imperceptible, the frog remains until it's too late. This unsettling metaphor captures the essence of the boiling frog syndrome, how we fail to notice incremental change even when it leads to our own undoing. In life, pressure rarely arrives all at once. It comes quietly. A toxic job becomes bearable. A controlling relationship becomes normal. Freedoms disappear bit by bit, and discomfort becomes familiar. Because the human mind is exquisitely adaptive, sometimes to a fault. This concept is not just psychological, it's deeply manipulative. Those in power know that if you push too hard, too fast, resistance rises. But if you erode comfort inch by inch, few even notice. We normalize our own discomfort in the name of survival. And so the real danger is not the fire, but the warmth. Now pause. Reflect. What heat have you grown used to? What feels normal that once felt wrong? As the water ripples, we drift next into a broken window, a crack that invites collapse. The broken window theory. Picture a building with a single broken window. Left unrepaired, soon another window shatters, then another. Before long, the entire structure decays. This is the haunting logic behind the broken window theory, that visible signs of disorder, no matter how small, invite further chaos. Originally applied to urban crime, this theory suggests that when disorder is tolerated, people are more likely to behave destructively. A cracked rule invites others to bend. A neglected detail signals that no one's watching. But it's not just about cities or crime, it's about psychology. In groups, homes, relationships, if neglect is allowed, it grows. If boundaries are ignored, they vanish. We internalize the environment around us, even if it's slowly decaying. Manipulators use this principle with eerie precision. They leave metaphorical windows broken, minor disrespects, half-truths, unchecked assumptions, until the entire foundation weakens. What starts as something small becomes a system. Now, in the soft silence, look inward. What small fractures have you accepted as permanent? Let the quiet settle over those cracks, and float with me into the next layer of social distortion, where mirrors aren't just for reflection, but comparison. Social comparison manipulation. We're always measuring, but rarely do we measure ourselves in isolation. We glance sideways to peers, strangers, filtered lives, and ask, "How am I doing?" This is the mechanism behind social comparison, and when weaponized, it becomes a subtle trap. Social comparison manipulation occurs when our perception of others is curated, exaggerated, or distorted to shape our beliefs about ourselves. Advertisers show you ideal lives not just to inspire, but to dishearten. Influencers flaunt perfection not to share, but to induce yearning. And in relationships or workplaces, some deliberately control the reference points you see. If you're constantly shown those doing better, your worth shrinks. If you only hear about those doing worse, your gratitude is manipulated. This quiet conditioning keeps you striving, doubting, or submitting, always adjusting your sense of self to an illusion. It's a psychological mirror maze, and every reflection is skewed. Take a breath. Close your eyes. Let the comparisons fall away like dust. Now, we'll drift into the realm of mental shortcuts, where the things most available to the mind often feel the most true. The availability heuristic trap. What comes to mind first often feels the most important. But what if memory isn't a mirror, but a manipulated spotlight? The availability heuristic is our brain's tendency to judge probability based on how easily examples come to mind. If we've recently seen news about plane crashes, we overestimate their frequency. If someone mentions 3 divorces in a week, marriage might seem doomed. It's not rational. It's accessible. This shortcut is useful, but easily hijacked. Media outlets, politicians, even friends can flood your awareness with curated examples, priming your fears or hopes. Suddenly, rare dangers feel imminent. Unlikely events feel everyday. Manipulation thrives here. What you're reminded of shapes what you believe. This isn't just a bug in the system. It's a carefully designed feature used by those who understand how to hijack attention and thereby reality. Now let your thoughts settle like leaves in still water. Notice which memories rise easily and which have been buried. As you rest, we'll glide into the next illusion, where fear isn't just a feeling, it's a tool. Appeal to fear fallacy. Fear sharpens the senses. It narrows the world into threats and responses. But fear is also easy to fake, and easier still to manipulate. The appeal to fear fallacy is a tactic where fear is used to persuade, even when the threat isn't real or proportionate. If you don't do this, disaster will strike. Without me, you'll suffer. It bypasses logic and drives straight into the limbic system, triggering instinctive obedience. Politicians use it. Advertisers love it. Abusive partners master it. They conjure worst-case scenarios to corner you, frame themselves as the only solution, and create a prison shaped like protection. It works not because it's true, but because fear is louder than thought. This fallacy doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It embeds anxiety in your decisions until you can't tell where your logic ends and your fear begins. So now, breathe deeply. Notice the fears that don't belong to you. Let them go. Let your pulse slow as we float next into a mind trick that's far quieter yet deeply persistent. The illusion that truth is simply what you've heard the most. The repetition illusion, illusory truth. There's a strange comfort in repetition. A phrase heard once is a stranger. Heard twice, it becomes familiar. By the 10th time, it feels true. This is the eerie nature of the illusory truth effect, the mind's tendency to mistake repetition for accuracy. You might hear a claim, odd, implausible, even absurd, and shrug it off. But hear it again, subtly rephrased, repeated in casual conversation, reinforced in a meme, whispered in passing, and it starts to sink in. The brain, ever hungry for cognitive ease, begins to nod. Familiarity masquerades as truth. It doesn't matter whether the statement is factually correct. The mind doesn't vet every claim. It feels its way through familiarity. Propaganda feeds on this. Marketing thrives on it. Gossip survives by it. We are persuaded not by logic, but by echo. And so, in a world filled with loops and refrains, your beliefs may not be yours at all. They may be borrowed from repetition's lullaby. Close your eyes, feel the words fade. Notice what ideas have lived in your mind simply because they've stayed too long. And now we descend deeper into the algorithms of instinct, where the very shortcuts designed to save us can be turned against us. Heuristic Hijacking. The human brain is a marvel of efficiency. Faced with endless decisions, it cuts corners. These shortcuts, heuristics, guide us through life with minimal friction. But what happens when someone learns how to hijack them? Heuristic hijacking is the art of exploiting your brain's own speed for their gain. Consider this. When a message comes from someone in a lab coat, we believe it's scientific. If something is expensive, we assume it's high quality. If many people agree, we assume it's right. These aren't decisions. They're reflexes, and reflexes can be manipulated. Marketers, con artists, even well-meaning influencers learn how to push these cognitive buttons. They don't argue, they nudge. They use the packaging of truth, not the substance. A symbol, a color, a statistic without context. It's not always malicious, but it's always powerful. You may think you chose, but often you were simply steered. Now let's breathe and step beyond the mechanics of influence into something more intimate, more unsettling. Not manipulation through logic or structure, but through love, dependency, and slow erosion. A place where control doesn't feel like control at all. Coercive control in relationships. Not all prisons have bars. Some are built with affection, fear, and silence. Coercive control in relationships isn't about bruises or screaming matches. It's about the quiet dismantling of a person's independence, one invisible thread at a time. It starts subtly, a preference here, a suggestion there. Slowly you're discouraged from seeing certain friends or dressing a certain way. Your voice begins to shrink. Your decisions seem to need permission. And you begin to doubt yourself. Was this your choice or theirs? The genius of coercive control is that it hides in plain sight. To outsiders, everything seems fine. To the person inside, love is used as a leash. There are no scars to point to, only a growing emptiness. This is manipulation as architecture, a deliberate construction of dependence, eroded confidence, and enforced silence. It thrives not on violence, but on invisibility. Let that sink in. Let the shadows of control reveal themselves, even in places where love was spoken most often. And as we now drift from the emotional to the mental, we'll enter a stranger place, where the mind is not simply guided, but shut down by force, with just a few words. Thought-stopping commands. Imagine your mind is circling a question, uncomfortable but necessary, and then, don't overthink it, or let it go, or that's just negative thinking. Just like that, the wheel stops turning. This is the subtle violence of thought-stopping commands, language used not to soothe, but to silence. These phrases often masquerade as wisdom. In therapy, they may be tools, but in manipulation, they are weapons. They halt reflection. They suppress doubt. They create obedience not by force, but by shaming thought itself. Cult leaders use them. Abusive partners use them. Corporations use them. Any environment where critical thinking is a threat will create slogans to replace it. It is what it is. Stay positive. Just trust the process. The deeper message is always the same. Stop thinking. Stop questioning. Submit. But thought is sacred. Thought is freedom. When someone fears your thoughts, it means your mind still has power. So now, let your thoughts rise again. Let them circle, meander, and glow. And with that, we close.